What can you find in your wife's laptop? If the wife doesn't hide anything from her husband, then I'm sure there won't be anything interesting there, but what can you find in the laptop of the wife's girlfriend? That's another question. I met my wife Linda through an unexpected twist of fate. Similarly, I discovered she was cheating on me through another twist of fate. Although years separated these events, both happened at the same place, my workplace in Honolulu, Hawaii. The business I started was purely accidental. I attended the University of Hawaii with the goal of earning an MBA and securing a position at a Fortune 500 company. Even with in-state tuition, I needed to work to support myself in school since my family wasn't wealthy. My interest in how computers functioned began in high school, so to earn some extra cash in college, I leveraged my skills by repairing computers for others. I eventually started creating my own products and selling them at a lower price than what you'd find at Best Buy. I earned my bachelor's degree but chose not to pursue graduate school. Since I had launched my own business, I didn't see the point in working for someone else. During my college years, I realized I didn't collaborate well with others, and that lesson proved to be just as valuable as my degree. I met Linda's brother Don before I met her. He had a computer problem, specifically with his father's equipment. He brought in his dad's old Intellivision gaming console, a rare piece of gaming hardware from the 1980s. Don's father felt nostalgic about it, and Don wanted to get it restored for his father's birthday. The console hadn't worked for over a decade, but Don had found it in an attic or basement or something similar. Don Eldridge was built like a fortress. His chest resembled a rectangle, solid and sturdy. He had played football as a defensive tackle in high school and college. During that time, he let his curly brown hair grow long and wild, accompanied by a matching beard. With a notably large nose, which could easily be likened to a trunk, and his name being Don, it was only natural for someone to nickname him the Mastodon. That moniker stuck, though it was often shortened to just Mastodon. Whenever he made an impressive play, fans would mimic elephant sounds. Physically intimidating, Don's demeanor was remarkably friendly. He was the type of person who always helped up a player he had just tackled. He possessed a strong sense of fair play, along with some formidable skills on the field. If he hadn't injured his knee during his last year at the University of Hawaii, he might have reached the NFL. The Mastodon was a figure of Hawaiian royalty. Although I'm not at all athletic, I've always been a follower of the Rainbow Warriors. Yes, that's a real team name, chosen by our shared alma mater long before rainbows were considered trendy. Don arrived with the gaming console shoe relic in hand and said, "I hear you can help me with something." While he wasn't the most articulate, he certainly had a way of getting his point across. Although I had decided that continuing my college education wasn't the right path for me, I still felt a sense of loyalty to the place where I had spent 4 years figuring out what I didn't want to do with my life. I was a bit starstruck. Mastodon, I can't believe Hawaii's most eligible bachelor is here at my place. Oh, I'm Ryan, by the way. Ryan Nowak. He gave me a hearty slap on the back that nearly dislocated my shoulder. Well, Ryan, I won't be a bachelor for much longer. For some reason, a woman has agreed to marry my ugly self. My sister is the good-looking one in the family. That didn't exactly set the bar very high. I quoted him my price, which I discounted, essentially breaking even, out of respect for him. I also requested a signed photo that I could display if he was happy with my service. I wasn't about to let that marketing class I took go to waste. 2 weeks later, I met Linda when she came to collect Don's restored Intellivision. He was busy with a local commercial or taking tourists out on his boat for Mastodon tours. I was instantly attracted to her. She had the same curly, long brown hair as her brother. Although her nose was not so pronounced and she was several inches shorter, she had many similar features but much more attractive and petite. She wasn't a bombshell, but she was definitely attractive with a girl next door kind of allure. Think Jennifer Grey in Dirty Dancing. We began dating, which is how I met her best friend, as well as her brother's wife, Candace. Candace and Linda had been friends since elementary school. She had a crush on Linda's older brother, Don, ever since she hit puberty. Eventually, Candace grew into a beautiful woman, and Don noticed his sister's friend and pursued her. That's the sweetened version I was given. What really happened was that Candace blossomed into a stunning woman. She looked like one of those Hawaiian women you see in tourism ads, a blend of Asian and native islander, with a dash of something else attractive mixed in. There was no doubt in my mind that she had her sights set on him, and he was unable to resist. When we all got together, I felt like the odd one out. The three of them shared memories I wasn't part of, but eventually I settled in. One interesting detail that came up was that Candace never allowed anyone to call her by the obvious nickname, Candy. She dismissed any attempts to use it, and one night when I asked her why, she said, "Candy sounds like a dumb stupor. That's not the impression I ever wanted to leave on anyone." Don and Candace got married, and shortly after, Linda and I did as well. Linda and I had 2 children, whom I'll refer to as Thing 1 and Thing 2. Don, on the other hand, was unable to have children, so he and Candace decided to adopt. They brought home 2 kids around the same time that Linda gave birth to ours. Although adoption takes time, it felt like we were all in sync with one another. Being part of such a strong quartet was wonderful. We enjoyed each other's company, our kids played together, and we were almost daily fixtures in each other's lives. Naturally, something that perfect couldn't last forever. The universe seems to have a disdain for lasting happiness in our lives. I had expanded my business to the point where Linda didn't need to work. I was not only repairing and building computers, but I also restored old arcade games and home gaming systems. I owe that particular inspiration to Don. I could fix an Atari 2600 or restore the Journey arcade game to perfect working order. Some people will pay a premium to play a mediocre video game as long as Journey's music is playing in the background. The change came when our kids were finally old enough to start school. Linda wanted a part-time job, which I had no problem with. I wouldn't want my beloved to feel bored. She took a position with a credit card company in their call center. It was a 4-hour shift, allowing her to drop the kids off at school and be back before they returned home. We were all happy. Really, we should have been on a poster representing the ideal family. It was Candace who unintentionally uncovered Linda's infidelity. I was having a typical day at work when Candace called and said, "Ryan, I really need you to work on my computer. It's an emergency. I need it right now." The emergency was that her laptop was a useless piece of metal that wouldn't even boot up. Candace, an aspiring novelist, had all her stories stored on that laptop. I promised her I would do my best to help after lecturing her about the importance of backing up work on a thumb drive. And then I got to work. Retrieving the data wasn't particularly difficult. Candace had let her virus protection lapse, which resulted in her being shut down after visiting or downloading something inappropriate. My curiosity piqued. I investigated the cause. It turned out to be a photo that Linda had sent via email. That email featured a very attractive man with his shirt off. I would later learn his name was Hunter Sampson. Along with the photo, Linda had texted, "This is my boss." The combination of the photo and the exclamation point prompted me to delve into Candace's email conversations with Linda. Without going into details, it became clear that Linda's boss had sent her that photo, which she then shared with her best friend. I must give my sister-in-law credit for confronting Linda about what had transpired. What had she said that made her boss feel comfortable sending a picture flaunting his impressive abs? In that email exchange, she was relentless when Linda tried to downplay it as merely a photo of him surfing that he sent because she expressed interest in seeing it. Candace firmly expressed that Linda was dangerously close to crossing a line. Linda quickly backtracked and agreed, making all the appropriate reassurances that she wouldn't encourage such behavior again. Everything seemed fine, but I remained skeptical. Could it really have ended there after Candace's reprimand? I wasn't sure, so I decided to check Linda's laptop. Knowing she was aware of my profession, I suspected she would be smart enough to delete any incriminating emails and even empty the trash if she sent anything inappropriate. However, what she hadn't deleted were her sent messages, which often trips people up. This folder contained a huge amount of information. Many of her messages were replies to previous ones, which allowed me to get a clear picture pretty quickly. By picture, I mean that Linda sent him a picture of a forbidden nature. She mentioned that she would have sent more if he had sent a photo in response, but he replied that she would have to see it in person, since no image can really convey it. After that, the subsequent emails changed for the worse. It was clear that they were close after that. They both enthusiastically described how wonderful their meetings had been and looked forward to the next one. I did what any reasonable person would do if they looked at my wife's personal email and found such information. That evening, I decided to talk to her frankly. This had to be approached carefully, since it was Wednesday, and the next day the children had to go to school. I definitely didn't want the neighbors to call the police. Children tend to remember incidents like this. When I arrived home that night, I replied to her greeting, "Hey dear, how was your day?" with, "Let's discuss it later." She sensed that something was bothering me, probably because I have a poor poker face. She didn't press for details, and we went on to have dinner and get the kids settled for bed. Afterward, as we sat on the couch, she turned to me and said, "Whatever is on your mind, just know that you can share it with me." She looked at me with anticipation. I really appreciate that. It's not always easy for a man to express his feelings, but you've created a space where I feel comfortable doing so with you right now. I covered her hand with mine. Linda appeared moved by my words. "Of course you can, sweetheart. I'm here for you." She squeezed my hand and I returned the pressure, meeting her gaze, and said, "I appreciate it. I'm really worried about the fact that you're sleeping with your boss. I think we need to discuss how we can handle the divorce without affecting the children." She recoiled from my hand as if it were poisonous. Her face turned pale, and she made a sound like the moan of a dying animal as she ran out the front door, got into her car, and drove away. It didn't happen the way I expected. I prepared an entire speech, but her sudden departure disrupted it. It felt like a betrayal, even worse than the betrayal itself. I've rehearsed so many quips in my mind. That plan to confront everything head-on had only made matters worse. Now I had to get the kids ready for school in the morning, which was definitely not my forte. I hadn't gotten the chance to express my feelings or get any explanations, and suddenly I found myself a single father of two. Linda had gone completely silent for the next 2 days. I had no clue where she was or what she was thinking. She had just vanished. Trying to explain her absence to the kids felt like a way to buy time. Until I heard from her, I didn't know how to talk to them without causing distress. So, I told them something I thought they could grasp without being worried. Mama is visiting Aunt Candace and Uncle Don. It turned out to be true. Linda was staying with her best friend and her brother. I found this out during a phone call from Don, who invited me to his home for a discussion while the kids were away, with Linda there as well. I have a lot of love for Don and Candace. It was clearly an intervention. My curiosity, along with the desire to finally share my thoughts, led me to agree. Additionally, all our kids were going to spend the weekend with their grandparents, which meant there would be an opportunity for some shouting. The intervention took place in Don and Candace's home. They sat together on the couch, presenting a united front, while Linda and I were seated in comfortable chairs facing them. Looking back, it was a good setup. It felt as if Don and Candace weren't taking sides. It was more like we were both under scrutiny. Don began the conversation by saying, "Ryan, I love you. You've been a wonderful husband to my sister, and I will always appreciate you for that. However, I know my sister has caused you pain. It has hurt me as well, my friend, and I want you to understand that I feel for both of you." My nails dug into the arms of the luxurious chair I was sitting in when I said, "Thank you, Don. I appreciate that you understand my pain and can empathize with me. I just want Hunter to feel the same way. After all, he played a role in causing this pain. I would like him to feel discomfort all over his body, as I feel it now." At that moment, Candace intervened. "I hope you're not considering a physical confrontation. Maybe just a little bit. I would love to swing a cricket bat at him." Candace replied with a slight smile. "Why not with a baseball bat?" "Because I don't want to end up in jail for assault, and I think a cricket bat is more likely to cause fewer injuries." Don said, "This is impractical for 2 reasons." "Why not?" "We live on an island where no one plays cricket. So where would you find a cricket bat?" Don made a valid point. "What's the second reason?" "Violence doesn't solve anything." "I disagree. It ended fascism in Europe. You can't equate Hunter with a NZ. You're right, there's no comparison. A NZ never slept with my wife." Linda finally chimed in. "I imagine the hardest part for you must be the lies and the betrayal. That breach of trust will be difficult to mend." I paused for a few seconds. Everyone watched me, eager to see how I would respond to her comment. I replied, "Actually, that's not the worst part. The worst part is that you had intimacy with someone else." Linda attempted to salvage what she thought was an opportunity for me to accept her sincere and remorseful confession. "I only slept with him 7 times. I nodded. "That's a relief. Thank goodness it was only 7 times and not some unthinkable number. Since you all seem to be the experts on this, what would that number be?" I glanced around the room. No one responded. I didn't expect them to, as it was a rhetorical question. Don quickly took the lead in avoiding the topic. "Whether it's once, twice, or 100 times, that's not what matters. What's important is that Linda wants to mend your marriage and feels deeply sorry." Candace immediately chimed in. "That's absolutely right. Are you sure the issue with moving forward isn't just your ego?" I didn't have to think twice about my response. "I can answer that without a doubt, Candace. Of course it's my ego. I can't believe you're all trying to downplay that." Don replied, "Listen, man, your ego is something you can control. No one is trying to belittle it. You can take charge of it and empower yourself. Why let it obstruct true love? Consider this. Forgiveness is a gift you give not only to someone else, but to yourself as well." I felt like I was in the Twilight Zone or Los Angeles. I turned to Linda and asked, "So, if I had an affair with another woman 7 times over 3 months, you'd forgive me?" "Oh yes, absolutely. I would hate it. It's the worst thing I could imagine, but I'd take you back. I'll prove it to you. Go ahead and have an affair. Get back at me. I deserve it. I want you to have an affair. Please do it if it will help us get back together. It can be with anyone you like, my best friend, my worst enemy, or a complete stranger." I have to admit, she was saying all the right things. However, those words didn't really address why she had done it in the first place, so I asked, "Linda, why did you do it in the first place?" "It had nothing to do with you, Ryan. When Candace and I went on double dates, she always ended up with the attractive guy, and I got stuck with the less appealing friend. I never got the hot one. This was the first time the hot guy actually showed interest in me. That didn't improve my mood. I know I'm not the hottest guy around." What surprised me more was that Candace seemed angrier than I was. She snapped, "Are you seriously blaming me for this, you bitch? I worried Candace might lash out, but Dawn held her back. Linda stood up from her chair and said, "I'm not blaming you at all. I was just feeling jealous. Please don't think I'm pointing fingers at you. You're my sister. It was my own insecurity. I don't want to lose our friendship." Candace stopped struggling in Dawn's hold and replied, "You'll never lose my friendship. We've always been sisters, and we always will be. I'm sorry you didn't get the attractive guys. You deserved one, although none of them can compare to my Dawn. I wish you had one early on to realize that looks aren't everything." I felt like the conversation was slipping away from me, and at that moment, my main concern was myself. I tried to steer it back on course. "Candace, I know you care about your best friend, and you say I'm a good friend too. If I cheated on Linda, would you be just as forgiving? Would you still encourage your best friend to reconcile with me?" Candace somehow shifted from the earlier emotional moment and stated, "Yes, I would. Here's why." She managed to compartmentalize it. What she did had nothing to do with you. She was leading two separate lives. I replied, "That sounds completely absurd." Candace responded, "I understand it's difficult for men to grasp, but all women can do this to some extent." That caught me off guard. I turned to the only other man in the room to hear his thoughts. "So let me clarify, Don. If Candace cheated on you for 3 months, you would forgive her?" Don looked at me, clearly offended. "That's a ridiculous question. Candace isn't some promiscuous woman who would betray her husband and be unfaithful with some man-a-girl of easy virtue, jeopardizing her marriage." At that point, Linda began to cry. Her tears and sobs were quite dramatic. Don looked uncomfortable and said, "What I meant is that we can all be tempted, even Candace. Not that she would ever cross that line, but if she did, I would forgive her." That seemed like nonsense to me, so I turned to his wife and asked, "Candace, if you were to cheat on Don, whom I know you love, would you expect to be forgiven?" "I can't believe you would even imply that I would do such a thing. I'm not some kind of a girl of easy virtue." Linda burst into tears and curled up in a fetal position. Candace hurried over to comfort her. "No, not you, Linda. You aren't a girl of easy virtue just because you've been with another man besides your husband." Linda cried even louder. Candace tried to clarify, "Sleeping with someone else doesn't make you a girl of easy virtue. You are not a girl of easy virtue. You didn't do it for money. You did it because you're struggling with self-esteem issues." At that point, Linda began to shake and slapped herself in the face. I noticed Don was torn over whether to call for an ambulance. Don and Candace held her hands to stop her from hurting herself. Once more, I attempted to bring a voice of reason to the discussion after Linda was stopped from harming herself. I turned to Candace and said, "Let me make sure I understand. Linda wants me to have an affair. Don says he'd forgive you for having one. You argue that it's normal for someone to desire intimacy with an attractive person, and that a lapse in judgment shouldn't be held against them. Is that correct?" Don replied, "Yes, we all told you that. Candidly, you also mentioned that I should love Linda as much as you do since I married her," I pointed out. "That's right, Ryan. You married her, for better or worse. Don and I care more about her well-being than you seem to. She's obviously a complete mess." "Well," I said, "you've all given me a lot to think about." It felt like the right moment for me to excuse myself and end the night. I liked Don, I liked Candace, and I definitely loved Linda. It would be painful to cut them out of my life. However, this evening had turned into a chaotic situation, and not in a positive way. I left feeling like I had disrupted their close relationship, yet none of them truly cared about me. I returned home and spent hours staring at the ceiling, deep in thought. Around 3 a.m., I had a revelation. I managed to get about 2 hours of sleep after going over my thoughts repeatedly. I woke up to the sound of the doorbell ringing right after finishing my first cup of coffee. Yes, I usually wake up after my first cup. I have no recollection of how I got thing 1 and thing 2 to school, and I wasn't even sure if I had fed them. It was Candace at the door. I let her in, but I felt cautious. The previous night had been chaotic. I poured myself another cup of coffee and offered her one too. Candace said, "Sorry about the chaos last night." I almost spat out my coffee when she voiced my thoughts. After a moment I replied, "I've come to realize you're right. You're showing her more concern for her well-being than I am. So I have a solution. I'm glad you've seen reason." I paused for effect. "You and I will have an affair. Once that happens, Linda will be completely forgiven." "What? Seriously, what?" "Linda told me I could have an affair if it would improve things, so I'm taking her at her word. Don said he'd forgive you if you cheated on him, so I'm taking him at his word too. You mentioned you'd expect to be forgiven, so I'm holding you to that. I need to talk to Don about this before I even think about it. That would ruin the point. Linda kept it from me, lied, and left me in the dark. Don has already said he'd forgive you, so there's no need to consult him. Tell him afterward if you have to." Linda never told me. I had to catch her in the act. "Honestly, I want you to inform him after it's done, but not before. I'll definitely tell Linda." "And how am I supposed to face Don every day while keeping this a secret?" "You might try compartmentalizing. I've heard it's something women can do better than men." "I don't think I can handle this. There are too many factors to consider. Why not just find someone else?" "Well, Father Time hasn't been too kind to my hairline. I doubt I'll find anyone attractive who would actually be interested in me. I'd probably have to hire an escort, which isn't really an affair. You have a vested interest and a fantastic body, so you're my best option." Her reply was, "I'll have to think about it." Of course, that really meant no. I wasn't surprised that Candace didn't mean what she said. I was already planning for the divorce. But 2 days later, Candace changed her mind. "I've decided to go along with your solution." I wish I could say it was because she had been daydreaming about my body all along and finally gave in to the inevitable. The truth was more predictable. She burst into my house in a panic, not even bothering to knock. "I can't take this anymore. She's driving both me and Don crazy. She's ruining my marriage." I could have made a sarcastic comment at that moment, but when things are going well, it's best to hold back. Too bad, because I had a great line ready. Candace agreed to all my terms, but her only condition was that I truly forgive Linda if she went through with it. I honestly hadn't expected her to give in to everything I proposed, so I hesitated for just a moment. But then I quickly responded, "Absolutely." Candace said, "I'm only doing this because she's my best friend. I'm not too fond of right now." Still, she agreed, and that was what mattered. Once she committed, we could work on the specifics. However, she raised a concern. "It'll look suspicious if you immediately forgive Linda. How do we convince Linda and Don that you're accepting Linda back?" I had a solution for that situation. All I needed to do was give Linda a way out. I called her during my lunch break that day. "Linda, I need you to report your relationship with Hunter to your Human Resources Department." "Why? I can't say it was intimacy harassment. I won't lie about it." "I would never ask you to, my dear. I wouldn't want you to do anything unethical that would weigh on your conscience. However, while reviewing your employee manual, I found a policy regarding fraternization between a superior and a subordinate. You know, one of those rules aimed at preventing intimacy harassment. You really work for a progressive company, so just report the relationship." She went ahead and did it. It turned out Hunter was married to a very wealthy woman, and there was a prenup involved. It's quite a fortunate turn of events when your enemy unwittingly puts themselves in a vulnerable position. You just need to pull the rug out from under them. Let's just say things took a turn for the worse for Hunter, and he left Hawaii never to be seen again. When Linda returned, I welcomed her with open arms. We exchanged kisses, and that night we made love. Linda and I were together again, but I think it was conditional. I still had my doubts. Linda could feel it. Despite the fact that we were close and behaved like a family, she understood that I had not completely forgiven her. She knew that there was still a barrier between us, and she was right. That barrier won't go away until Candace shows up. When I organized our first meeting, Candace was determined. I made sure that she would be remembered for a long time. I booked a room at the Four Seasons Hotel with a king-size bed decorated with rose petals scattered over lightly tucked sheets. I lit the candles, making sure they didn't turn on the fire alarm, which I turned off. As soon as she enters, she will be greeted by a bottle of champagne and a vase of strawberries. If this was going to be a secret affair, I intended to fully embrace the role of the lover. I wanted her to be into it, so it was only fair that I got into it too. Thankfully, that came easily to me. I was excited about it, and even though I had a feeling Candace might change her mind at any moment, I wasn't about to be the one to ruin the vibe. I was committed to doing my part and trusting she would do hers. If not, we'd just end up right where we began. Candace shattered my expectations. She arrived wearing a long coat that was completely unsuitable for the weather, along with what looked like an overnight bag. "Ryan? What's up with the champagne and strawberries? This isn't going to work." "Why not? I already have the most romantic, amazing, best lover at home. So don't even think about being better than him. Get those rose petals off the bed. I'm not eating strawberries and I need a few minutes in the bathroom." "Does this mean you're backing out?" "No, you clueless idiot. It just means we're going to have intimacy, not make love. I better not see a single rose petal on that bed when I come out of the bathroom." She slammed the door behind her after entering with her overnight bag. Old Faithful had been ready and waiting long before she stepped into the room. As I waited for her to come out, the poor guy started to wilt with each passing minute as I wondered, what the hell is she doing in there? The woman who came out of the bathroom was wearing smooth black underwear that accentuated her figure. Her bright red lipstick accentuated a self-confidence that was impossible to miss. If this works, you should know that I'm Candy. Not Candace. Candy. I'm here for pleasure, nothing more. Every time we meet, I'm Candy. Do you have a problem with that? Her words left me speechless. The gaze and determination in her tone attracted me, not letting me think about anything else. Call me Candace just once and it's over. There was something captivating about her duality, a contrast that intrigued me. Candy led me to the bed, and time seemed to stop. We plunged into the atmosphere of the moment. The world around us disappeared. After that, our conversation was unusual. "You're not with Candace. You're with Candy. As long as you understand this, the relationship between us will remain exciting." There was something almost strategic about the way she spoke, as if every word had been carefully chosen. Over time, it became more and more difficult to hide. Linda, my wife, kept calling to let me know her whereabouts, which ironically made it difficult for me to have secret meetings with Candy. I assumed that Candace faced the same difficulties in her relationship with Don, but we never discussed it. When we were together, everything depended on the moment. No questions were asked. Strangely enough, my meetings with Candy had an unexpected impact on my relationship with Linda. Every time I met Candy, I felt like I was quietly reconnecting with my wife. Our relationship gradually began to improve. I found that I became more attentive to Linda's needs, more grateful for her presence. In a way, What I shared with Candy reminded me how much I appreciate the tenderness and connection with my wife. While I couldn't deny that those stolen moments with Candy made me tremble, they also made me cherish my time with Linda even more. The only uncomfortable moments at first were when the four of us were together. Don or Linda would make an innocent comment that made my mind race with, "Don't look at Candace. Don't look at Candace. Don't look at Candace." For instance, Don once said, "I admire you, Ryan. I know this has been tough for you. You've taken the high road. You could have hired an attractive prostitute as revenge, but you didn't. You asked Linda to make it up to you, and she did. Well done, brother." Meanwhile, I was thinking, why does Don think I need to hire a prostitute? Then reason kicked in. Don't make eye contact with Candace. So I replied, "Thanks, brother." Candace seemed comfortable with the whole situation. I had to admit that women might compartmentalize better. For me, I was on high alert for any comments that hinted at intimacy innuendo. While our partners were playing with their toys and the adults were sipping wine, Linda looked at Don and Candace and said, "I want to thank you both for your support. You've helped Ryan and me get back together." Then she kissed me. After the kiss, all I could think was, "Don't look at Candace, don't look at Candy." It was relatively easy since Candace also avoided meeting my gaze in those moments. Candace and Candy felt like two different people. Candy would message me as we got closer to being together. And yes, it was definitely Candy, not Candace. I briefly worried that I might be contributing to a potential multiple personality disorder, but I dismissed it because I had a marriage to save. Nothing worthwhile comes without a price. Candy sent me pictures of herself in different outfits. I met with Candy to make myself known to her, Don and Linda. I was with her also because she was attractive. I had no idea if my relationship with these people would last to the end, but I didn't give up hope. I can be an idealistic jerk. Candy kept her promises and was incredible. We lay in silence for several minutes, maybe an hour, after our meeting. It was wonderful. After our wild final encounter, I showered first, managing to keep my balance for the most part. Candy took her shower next, and when the bathroom door opened again, she was gone for good. Candace emerged dressed in her usual modest outfit, but her demeanor spoke volumes. We were finished. It was for the best. Enjoying a little candy occasionally is a treat, but a steady diet of it can be harmful. Candace left before I did. There was no farewell kiss, just a conversation about our next steps. She planned to tell Don everything that evening, and afterward we would inform Linda. After all, this was a family matter. Candace would talk to Don, and then we would all gather at my place. I informed Linda that Don and Candace would come over after the kids were in bed. It was time to lay everything out in the open. Don had something come up and would be arriving late, so it was just me, Candace, and Linda for now. I spoke first. "Linda, I'm completely ready to forgive you. In fact, I've already reached that point. However, before you accept this, I think Candace should speak first." Linda looked at Candace in confusion. "I slept with Ryan." Without hesitation, Linda hugged Candace. "Thank you, thank you, thank you. My God, you really are my sister." Candace hugged her back and replied, "I'm so sorry that everything turned out this way. It was the only way out." "I love you," Linda exclaimed fervently. "It should have been you. Now I don't have to worry about Ryan getting sick or getting someone pregnant from him. Thank you." Things didn't unfold as I had anticipated. I initially thought the intervention was pointless, and I doubted anyone was genuine in what they were expressing. It turns out I was mistaken. I have no problem admitting when I'm wrong, no matter how difficult it is. I joined them for a group hug. Turning to Linda, I said, "I truly forgive everything. I want to spend the rest of my life with you." She leaped into my arms and kissed me. "Thank you, my love. You'll never regret this." Well, I believe we've all learned some important lessons here. Eventually, I had to set her down. I turned to Candace and said, "You've shown me something important and I owe you an apology. I put you in an uncomfortable position, and you demonstrated the true meaning of love. It was wrong of me to ask that of you. You've made me a better person by revealing what real love is." Candace hugged me tightly and gave me a gentle kiss on the lips, a far different kiss than the ones I'd experienced in recent months. "I did it for both of you. You two are meant to be together." Just then, the doorbell rang. I figured it was Dawn. "I'll get it." As I approached the door, I realized I had a lot to express. I had learned so much about myself and those close to me. A tear filled my eye as I recognized that the people around me were far more selfless than I had been. I had tried to highlight the hypocrisy of those around me, only to discover that it was my own male ego that was the real problem. I owed everyone an apology, especially to Dawn. "Dawn, the women are inside having a good cry. Honestly, I feel like crying too. I've discovered quite a bit about myself, and not all of it is flattering." Dawn replied, "I've come to understand something about myself as well. I think you might have been onto something with this whole male ego thing. I dismissed that idea too hastily." Dawn wore a strange expression that took me a moment to identify, as it was an emotion I'd never seen from him before. Then it struck me, barely concealed rage. That was it. At that moment, I had two questions. First, how had he found a cricket bat so quickly? Second, would a half-second head start be enough for me to reach the back door before an angry mastodon with a bad knee caught up to me? I decided to put off the answer to the first question as I sprinted through the house.